Welcome to WagerTalk College Football Podcast. Scott Spreitzer here with Dave Cokin and Marco D'Angelo. It is College Football Conference Championship weekend. We're going to break down Saturday's card. We'll also have best bets at the end of the show. As always, though, we start by heading to CGT Sportsbooks. Earlier on the Las Vegas Sports Line on ESPN Las Vegas with Dave, we had a chance to run through the college card and get the betting handle with CGT's Will Bernanke.
We'll say hi to Will Bernanke right now, the Moneyline guy on Twitter. And he's with CG Technology. We're going to go through all the big college games this weekend. We'll skip the Sun Belt games that, people like me care about, but not a whole lot of other people do. Will, how are you today?
Oh, great. Busy time of the year, but, time flies, and it's a fun time of the year, too.
The busy time means it's fun.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
When it's not busy, it's not as much excitement out there. So let's run down through where the money's showing up on these games. We can talk a little bit about each one. Stanford and USC gets the bowl, or not the bowl, but the playoff action started, because these are, in effect, these championship games in many cases are playoff games. Not so much in this game, but Stanford USC still looks like a real good battle on Friday.
Yeah, should be. Line's up to 4 already, even though it is in Santa Clara, which is like a quasi home game for Stanford. And so far the money, it's 5 times more money on USC on account, and 4 times more money on USC over the counter. So sharps in public are all over USC early in the week.
Conference USA Championship, North Texas and Florida Atlantic, Will, is being played at FIU. FIU about a 10.5-point favorite at last check. I mean, they crushed North Texas a few weeks ago, 69-31.
Wasn't that the game where they broke the yardage record?
804 yards of total offense for FAU. Will, they averaged 10 yards per play.
Yeah.
They averaged in that game. I looked at the line from back that game a few weeks ago, and I had FAU there. They were a 3.5-point home favorite in that one. This one's 10.5, Will.
Yeah, I mean, FAU last week was one of the first times they actually didn't cover in a while. And North Texas this week, they don't have Jeffrey Wilson. But believe it or not, 2 times more money is coming in on North Texas on account. Sharps are back in North Texas. The line hasn't moved yet. It's still 10.5, total 74, and over the counter is even so far.
I'll tell you what, they're a dangerous-looking team, and you wonder where Kiffin will be coaching next season. I have a feeling it won't be at Florida Atlantic.
Yeah, it could be a distraction.
Exactly. I tell you what, though, last week did they score in the second half last week? Because
No,
they just shut it down. I lost to them last week.
They stopped at 31. Yeah,
exactly.
They coasted to the winner's circle last week. We'll see what happens in this game. Here's a game that I think is going to be fascinating. Memphis. Now, I mean, UCF put a huge number on them the first time they met, but Memphis has got that offense really humming now. These 2 teams are going to be up and down the field, Memphis and UCF. I think this is going to be a really exciting game, and obviously the pressure on UCF to preserve their perfect season.
Yeah, interesting here. Seeing some action on the total. This is one of the highest totals tracked all year. 85.5. It's down to 83, and 2 times more money's coming in on the under over the counter. As far as the side, 4 times more Central Florida money is on account, and over the counter is even. So I think public kind of feels Memphis is good for a revenge spot here, and a lot of pressure on UCF, as you said, to preserve that perfect season.
MAC title game at Detroit's Ford Field, probably about 14 people in attendance. Akron taking on Toledo. Rematch of yet another mismatch earlier this year, Will. Toledo crushed Akron 48-21 back in October. They meet at Ford on Saturday, where the Rockets are a 21-point favorite. 626 yards by Toledo in that first meeting. They almost doubled up Akron. Toledo was 15.5, by the way, in that particular home game.
Yeah, well, Woodson's back from the suspension, so that should certainly help Akron here. I mean, it can't hurt them the way their offense has been playing with the backup in there.
The backup had a real good game against Ohio, though.
Yeah,
that's why they're playing in this game.
Definitely, the last week they held on for dear life there with the backup, but he held the fort. They're where they want to be, and we got 3 times more money on Toledo coming in on account, and over the counter again is even. We're getting both action both ways here.
One thing to remember, by the way, a lot of these games are revenge games, same season revenge, and I think the thought process among many people as well. I'm going to take the team that lost the first meeting. There have been about 30 of these over the years that have been same season rematches. And if you flat bet the teams that won the first meeting, you'd be ahead overall. I think it's like 17-13 against the spread, something like that. It's not a spectacular number, but it's kind of a misnomer that you want to bet on the revenge team automatically. Many times it's a psychological advantage for the team that won the first meeting. They already know they can beat this team. Georgia and Auburn is the most interesting of these because, I mean, they're both terrific teams. But, Will, Georgia got the living crap knocked out of it by Auburn in the first meeting. Now you've got Auburn coming off Alabama. This is a really fascinating matchup.
Yeah, this should be something. So far, people are buying into exactly what you said. 6 times more money on Auburn on account, 4 times more money on Auburn over the counter. So public and sharps are all over Auburn here. Now, interestingly, the line really hasn't moved that much, so that kind of could tell you something there. But it's all Auburn money so far. So we'll see what happens day of game. If it hits 3, 3.5, could change.
It's just my opinion, but I think if it gets to 3, you're going to get buyback immediately. I think that, personal opinion, I think sharp guys are waiting for 3 to see if it shows, and then they're going to buy Georgia.
Absolutely.
Fresno State at Boise State, Mountain West
How
action.
unfair is this?
Well, I was just going to say, I feel like I'm almost talking about.
Outrageous.
When's the last time you said same week revenge outside of a couple of pitchers going at it in Major League Baseball?
I'm sorry, but you cannot settle the argument as to who gets home field. Boise got this because they've got a higher ranking. Well, they've got a higher ranking because the rankings are wrong.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry they're wrong. Boise just lost at Fresno.
Yep.
It's head-to-head.
28-17 is a 6.5-point favorite. Yep.
Fresno, that's the tiebreaker to me. Fresno should have been the home team here.
Yeah, absolutely right about that. Fresno should be the home team here, considering they did win that game and won it handily. Now, we don't know how much Boise was showing in that game because they're obviously...
That's their problem.
Yeah, exactly. So the line's actually gone down 9.5 to 8.5. And 4 times more money on Fresno on account. So the sharps are back in Fresno. They're thinking the same thing. And 2 times more money on Boise over the counter so far.
I'm sitting there thinking, Fresno's going to be a little ticked off chip on their shoulder by having to play in Boise, Idaho. That might keep them a little bit more focused. Not that they wouldn't be, but again, it gets them over the team that the Revenger is going after. You know what I mean? It gets them a little ticked off having to play at Boise when they just whipped this team by 11 points last week.
I'll give you something else. My personal opinion, you could put a blindfold over Jeff Tedford and he can out-coach Harsin.
I happen to agree with that.
They've lost that aura and invincibility, too, up at the Smurf turf there, too.
They've lost it because, and I'm sorry, this is just, terrific assistant. I don't think there's any question about that. Hell of a play caller. I mean, he designed some, he's the one who designed all those great plays years back, but Harsin's a lousy head coach.
Yes.
And I think that's a big part of the reason Boise
It's not a great stadium anyway. You get over the blue turf, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, he's definitely been a notch below what they've had the last 3 coaches, even going back to Dan Hawkins' days.
A lot of the Boise fans are not happy with him. You can't can a guy who's winning this many games, I suppose, but we'll see. Anyway, Miami, another injury for Miami comes across the wire today. Makes their task even tougher. This is a difficult spot for Miami as they take on this powerful Clemson team that is now pretty healthy. And I think, for my money, I think they're the best team in the country when they're healthy.
Yeah, definitely. They're getting hot at the right time, and certainly bettors are noticing that. 3 times more money on Clemson over the counter, and the line, of course, has gone 6.5 to 9. I see some 9.5s other places. And on account, 2 times more money on Miami. So the sharps are back in Miami, I think, just because of the line climbing, and when it hits 10, you'll see some more buyback.
Talk about line movement. How about the Big Ten Championship? The Buckeyes were as low as 3. I've seen them as high as 6. I don't know if they're still there. You can fill us in just a second here. But, boy, just watch that Michigan game last week, and I see Jim Harbaugh actually, got to give him credit, the game plan was in place. They had the right game plan. They didn't have the right quarterback. They had a quarterback that probably would be about as effective as Cokin and I will. But this line now 6.
Yes, 3 to 6, amazingly. And what's even more amazing is all the money's coming in on Wisconsin with us. 4 times more money on Wisconsin on account, 3 times more money coming in on the Badgers over the counter. So they're all taking the dog. This could turn out to be one of those sort of contrarian favorites.
So is this a game where, depending on the location, the betting action is a lot different? Because it sounds like you guys are getting action one way, and the line in other places appears they're getting the action the other way.
Yeah, no, that happens often in certain games. Certain books have people are betting one way and betting another, whether it be because of where they're located, the type of fan base they have, all types of factors.
All right, TCU and Oklahoma. Boy, Oklahoma looks like a monster right now.
Yeah.
How's the betting going in that game?
It just looks like you said, a monster. 8 times more money on the Sooners on account, 7 times more money on Oklahoma over the counter. It's all Oklahoma money here, and you see it in the line 6 to 7.
Got to ask you about a little college basketball tonight, Will. You got Michigan taking on North Carolina. The Tar Heels looking for a little bounce back. They were scoring at will, not, no pun intended there, but then got absolutely strangled by that Michigan State defense. They lost 63-45. They only made 24% of their shots in that game. 1 of 18 from the three-point line. I mean, Sparty had them rattled from the start. Michigan has issues on the deep perimeter on the defensive end, but this number at last check, Will, and you could update us, dropped from 10.5 to 9.5.
Yeah, it's actually 9 now. It's all Michigan money so far. 2 times more money on Michigan on account, and over the counters even. But with the North Carolina game, we rarely see that. So we're getting mostly dog money here after what people saw in the last game.
I think a lot of people locally are going to be really fascinated to see what happens tonight. The Rebels are off to a great start. Now they face a team that's going to force the tempo to slow down, and they're going to throw a zone. Because that's what Jacobson does.
Yep.
Northern Iowa is going to throw a zone at UNLV, so it's a different type of animal tonight. What's happening with the betting action here?
Yeah, the 5-2 Northern Iowa against the undefeated Rebels, and right now the public is backing UNLV, and I guess you can't blame them. Nope. 3 times more money on UNLV over the counter, and on account it's even. Don't call it even, a slight tick towards Northern Iowa. With the Sharps here.
Dave and I are going to break that game down, by the way, in today's Wager Talk marquee matchup towards the end of the show. Duke and Indiana, final game we want to talk about in college basketball with you, Will, and find out where the betting is on this one. I saw Duke this morning drop from 10.5 to 8.5. Just shot some videos over at Wager Talk with Dave, and I haven't seen the line update since then, but I got to admit, I was a little surprised that the money had moved the line down 2 points instead of going with Duke, with Indiana struggling the way they have to start the season.
Yeah, I was seeing some sharp money here on Indiana. 2 times more money on Indiana on account, and over the counter is actually 3 times more money on Duke. So it's a kind of a pros versus Joe situation here with the public on Duke and the Sharps on Indiana. But I think they grabbed the better number 10. Once it's getting in single digits, they're probably staying away.
Well, we always have good reasons to promote the mobile app that CG Technology puts together. It's so much easier, but here's yet one more reason. You guys have posted a bunch of props for the playoff games this weekend, or the championship games this weekend. Those are all going to be available on the app as well.
Yes. The USC-Stanford game, the props should be up momentarily, if not already. And we have an action-packed weekend. You got all the conference championships. You got UFC this weekend, college basketball, NBA, NFL. So make sure you sign up for an account, go down to any CG location, and, absolutely got to do it, especially this weekend with the amount of games we got going on. So that's how people bet in 2017 and I could say 2018, right around the corner.
Yes, you can. We're already looking toward 2018. Good stuff, Will. Appreciate it, bud.
Oh, my pleasure, guys.
It's Manic Monday, and that means every pick at WagerTalk.com is just $9. Get a play in any sport valued at up to $30 for just $9 each and every Monday at WagerTalk.com.
Welcome back to Wager Talk College Football Podcast. It is College Football Conference Championship weekend, and we're going to break down a few of the games. Also, best bets still to come later in the show, and don't forget to check out the NFL podcast also here at WagerTalk.com. And guys, let's start with the SEC title game between Georgia and Auburn, the game in Atlanta, Georgia. Under the dome, Auburn a 2-point favorite, the total 48. And Marco, interesting note about this one, just a couple of weeks ago when they hooked up at Auburn, the Georgia Bulldogs were actually a 2.5-point favorite.
Yeah, what a difference a blowout over Georgia and then beating Alabama last week does. And, guys, we did videos at Wager Talk this week, and this is one of the games that we previewed. And, I posed the question to you guys. I know this is the SEC championship game, but you're looking at Auburn. They just beat Alabama. And I know the SEC championship is what the goal is, but how do you still match the same intensity? These are 20-some-year-old kids, early 20s, coming off the biggest high that they had, and they already beat Georgia. So if you're Auburn, you got to come in here, I love to use the phrase fat and sassy. Right now they got to be. And if you're Georgia, everybody talks about revenge games and everything else, but when you are the revenging team, you're the one that's going back to the chalkboard. You're changing the X's and O's. Auburn, what do they change? Everything worked. But, boy, this is a team that really, you talk about a balanced offense. I think they're 237 on the ground and 232 through the air for Auburn, and that's what makes them so tough to defend.
Jacob Fromm, man, Dave, it's all about can this guy make a few plays with his arm. Couldn't do it in the first matchup. One thing about Auburn under Gus Malzahn, when he goes up against a good defensive team, they just cover the spread 7-0 against teams that allow 14 points or less. He just is able to figure out these defenses. But I kind of like what Marco said about this game, and that, Auburn's coming in saying everything we did blew this team off the field. We're just off our Iron Bowl win, which probably to half the team means more than a national championship. And all of a sudden you've got Georgia, who's going to bring maybe a few different wrinkles than what Auburn saw 2 weeks ago.
Well, one thing that Georgia's going to have to do in this game is find a way to run the football, which they didn't do in the first game, and it got them in all kinds of trouble. Georgia isn't going to beat a real good team if they're having to rely on the kid throwing the ball. He's got to be more of a complimentary passer, a game manager. But they fell way behind in the first game, and that was the end of that. It went out the window. And look, if they fall behind again, and I'm talking about anything substantial.
Sure.
I don't think they have a way to come back. Auburn probably does. They're a little more balanced. They've got a better quarterback, and they're able to do more things on offense. That said, Georgia's shown themselves to be a very well-coached football team this year. Kirby Smart's done a really nice job with that team, and I think they are going to make some adjustments in their game plan and find a way to at least get something going with their running game. And if they can do that, that balances this game, and then you've got a battle that's just going to go back and forth. I think it becomes a really tough game to handicap from that standpoint, in that, if it's a blowout, it's probably Auburn. Mm-hmm. But if it's a close game, I got a feeling Georgia is more likely to pull it out. They've been in some tough battles this year and have found a way to win most of them, and I think they can do it here. I don't know if it makes my card or not. Haven't decided, but I'm leaning toward Georgia in the game.
If you're the Bulldogs, you're sitting there and you're going, okay, I know we don't have, if you're the coach, you're not saying this out loud, but I know we don't have the talent that Alabama does. But Alabama ran for 5.5 yards per pop against Auburn. Yeah. You look at A&M, there's a team you can beat. You look at A&M running for, it wasn't a ton of yardage, but it was over 4 yards per carry, and it was efficiently run. It was a 4.2 yards per carry that was efficient. So you look at that, and you kind of look at what those two teams did against this Auburn defense, and maybe you can find a wrinkle or two or an advantage or two that can allow you to run the football. It's going to have to be, they're going to have to do something. They were outgained 237-46 on the ground in that loss a couple of weeks ago. Again, the line, Auburn 2, the total 48. And once again, I'd also like to mention that it was Auburn who was the 2.5-point dog at home just a couple of weeks ago. ACC championship game in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's Miami taking on Clemson. And Dave, Clemson opened 6.5. They're all the way up to 9 at CGT Books. Total 46.5. A lot of injuries to that receiving core for the Canes.
Yeah, and of course they'd lost the running back earlier,
right?
Which they've compensated for. But the fact is, Miami has now played 2 bad football games in a row. They managed to escape against Virginia. Virginia's not much of a football team, and they were in deep trouble in that game. And now, they got beat last week, and now they're going against the best playoff team out there. Clemson should have 2. You could argue they should have 2 championships in a row. Mm-hmm. They're healthy again. I think Clemson's too much for them. I think this line has gotten to a point now where, if you miss the party, it's kind of late to arrive at it. And I wouldn't play it. I don't like playing beat-up numbers if I can help it. So I'll give myself a shot in the back of the neck for not reacting quickly to this line and jumping on it quickly, because I could have set myself up for a middle. Didn't do it. I think Miami's in trouble here, but I probably won't bother to lay the points to find out. However, I would only play Clemson.
Part of the problem for Miami now is when you're handicapping them, Virginia Tech wasn't quite as good as I thought they were going into the game against Miami. And that was actually a 14-10 game, as bad as Tech was playing at one point early in the second half. And then, the win over Notre Dame, which made Miami look like the most impressive football team in college football, doesn't look quite as impressive as it did when that happened with what Notre Dame's done since then. So, but boy, as Dave mentioned, if you didn't get 6.5, 7, all of a sudden you're having to win by 10 points or 2 touchdowns with this line where it is. Makes it a little bit more difficult to reach into the pocket and pull out a few skins when you're walking up to the book.
No question about that. But you look at, and Dave mentioned 2 bad games in a row. The Virginia game, very understandable, because that was the game immediately following the Virginia Tech and the Notre Dame game. I mean, Miami was on such a cloud, and we had talked about that game when we did the podcast that week that they were going from 2 national primetime nighttime games on a Saturday to going to a 12 o'clock game at home in Miami. Nobody, the crowd wasn't going to be, pumped up the way it was. Mm-hmm. And we took the advantage of getting the Virginia team, in there. I had Virginia that day, and it was an easy first half, but I'll give Miami credit. They got the wake-up call in the second half, rallied back to get the win, and just for a couple minutes, you had to sweat a little bit to hang on for the cover. But last week, no excuse last week. When you get that wake-up call, if you're a good football team, when you have that close scare, good football teams respond with a monster effort the next week. That's one of my favorite angles, is taking a good team when they have that lackluster performance, because one, the coach is going to ride them hard that week in practice. The players that maybe were a little lackadaisical that week, they know that they escaped, a big pothole. I mean, they were undefeated. Their season could have crashed down against Virginia, but to show up at Pitt the way they did, and for Pitt to beat them, and trust me, I love seeing Pitt beat Miami. I'm a big Pitt fan, from my days with season tickets there. But Pitt's not a good football team. But
especially with the backup quarterback.
That was the third string quarterback in it. Yeah,
backup, right?
Yeah. And, that was his first start. And, and he beat them. Maybe you could say, well, they didn't have any film on him, but you're still an undefeated team. You're not supposed to lose to the Pitt Panthers. But then again, last year, Clemson lost to Pitt, too. Amazing, though. Pitt's the only team that's knocked off 2 undefeated teams like that. And look, no bowl game.
Last year's Pitt team was really good outside of one area of deficiency. They couldn't stop the deep pass. But outside of that, they were a really good football team. This year's Pitt team was pretty
not
average.
Good at all.
It just makes you wonder, when you see at the level they're able to play once in a while, what in the world is this team doing going 4-7, 5-7? That's really
Narduzzi, because he's supposed to be. He was a defensive guy,
coach.
Yeah. And he didn't bring it with him. He left it in the Big Ten somewhere.
He's got to get some better personnel, and he just
he's not recruiting. I mean,
you got to recruit some speed in the secondary.
Yep.
They don't have it.
That's a whole nother story. But Pitt moving to the ACC, just geographically, it's stupid.
Right.
You're trying to
agree with that. Yeah.
You're trying to recruit. You're playing half your games down south. It just doesn't make sense.
The only thing it could do is
working
open
out for the basketball program.
The only thing it could do is open up a Florida recruiting pipeline, but they have not even come close to tapping a Florida pipeline as far as top Florida players.
Look, they moved for one reason. We know what that was. It had nothing to do with.
Yep.
It had nothing to do with anything except money.
Yep,
that's
absolutely.
It all.
I miss the old Big East, by the way. Speaking of basketball,
oh man, I'm telling you,
Big East tournament time that was the best. Madison Square Garden, and those were wars.
Listen, when I lived back east before I moved out here, that was a must. We're going to New York for the Big East tournament, baby.
Yeah,
that was the best.
I mean, going all the way back to the late 70s, early 80s. I mean, and to think that Jim Boeheim's still around. We're getting off point here a little bit, but I'm sitting there and I'm like, I like the Big East. I like the fact that Creighton, my hometown team, got into the Big East, but it's still not the same. I mean, I miss those days.
No, it's a good league, but it's not.
It's not what it was.
It's not the physical league that it was before.
Sure.
And whenever you had that Big East tournament, there was always a team that ran through it.
Right.
And you played those, 4 straight games and that. Then they were spent when they went to the big dance.
Well,
how many times you saw the Big East champion, go first round, second round, and they were gone? Here's
the thing. And I've been to a lot of conference tournaments because they come out here to Las Vegas now. And you'll have full houses for a couple of games. I mean, the tickets are sold, but you won't have a lot of full houses. That Big East tournament, for years and years and years, there were no seats available.
Yep.
Okay, and because fans, it didn't matter which team you were rooting for. You showed up for all the games anyway.
You didn't have to be in the conference. I mean, you could be living in the Midwest. I remember we were talking about a friend of ours who's with Sirius Radio for many years now, and Zig Fracassi, and him begging me to go to the Big East tournament. We lived here in Las Vegas. We're not a fan, or I wasn't of the Big East. I was a fan of their play, but there wasn't one particular team that I love this team. It's not my, so people were traveling from everywhere. I had friends from all over who would make have a little vacation time left over and use it in the Big East tournament in New York.
Plus,
it was
at Madison Square Garden. It's New York City.
You don't think it's
so beyond the icing on the cake. It is beyond it.
That's a huge recruiting tool.
Absolutely.
Whenever you can go into a kid, you go into a 17-year-old kid's family's home and you tell them You're going to play every year
at the Mecca.
Yeah, Madison Square Garden. Tell me that is not
and
a recruiting.
It still is, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, listen, I'm watching tonight Texas Tech and Seton Hall. And, you know, that was an intense basketball. Those teams were really pushing hard. Seton Hall ended up winning, which was good for me, by the way. But it's just a different feel there. It's fantastic.
Well, listen,
stuff.
I still hear teams that are in the league now that weren't before. Creighton, as an example, they go there. I remember when Doug McDermott walks in there for the first time, and he's sitting there going, "I can't believe I'm in the Garden."
Yeah.
You know what he's talking? I mean, it's cool stuff. Yeah. Guys, back to the gridiron.
Down memory lane.
We just lost everybody. Ohio State, Wisconsin doing battle in Indianapolis, another dome game in the Big Ten Championship. The Buckeyes open 3 up to 6. Last check, 5.5 at CGT. Total has dropped from 53 to 51 since Wednesday night. And I don't know, guys. I know a lot of guys' power ratings say Ohio State is a top 4 team. I'll just throw it to whoever wants to take it from here.
Okay.
I'm not buying it. Now, there are chances that they can get into the Final Four, and you have to say, you know what, if they beat Wisconsin and this happens and that happens, it's just going to be the way it is. But for them to overtake Alabama or anybody else to jump over to get there if they win this game, give me a break. They beat Army. They beat UNLV. Their other non-conference game, they get clocked for an entire half against Oklahoma. You know, look at what happened in Big Ten play. They get dusted by Iowa, barely over 500.
Well, but the thing is, I mean, see, and this is, I don't know how everybody keeps their power ratings, but for me, I mean, I didn't downgrade. To me, if they're losing the game by, it didn't matter what they lost the game by. They just lost it, and I didn't put a whole lot into the margin. They kind of gave up in the football game, and
they got their butts kicked. Let's talk about it serious here.
They did.
I mean, they were the second worst team on the field when they played the Iowa Hawkeyes by a long shot. Maybe not. I'm not saying power ratings over the course of the year, but in that game,
they were terrible.
Forget it. And then Oklahoma made them look silly in the second half, and that was at the shoe.
Oklahoma's really
here's
really
the bottom
good.
line. In the committee, there's no precedent. Okay, it changes every freaking year, and it drives me nuts. But if you're the committee and somehow Ohio State wins this game and you vote them into the Final Four, how do you look Penn State in the eye from last year? Because it's the exact same scenario.
That's right. And Penn State should have been in last year.
Penn State should have been in last year, but they told Penn State, well, you had the out-of-conference loss to Pitt that looked bad. Well, Pitt beat the national champion last year, and that was a rivalry game early in the season. You know,
Penn State was struggling early in the season.
And then they said, but your loss to Michigan was so bad, we can't do it.
Look, okay.
You lost at home to Oklahoma, which was a good team,
killed
but
for the
you
final
lost
2 quarters.
At home
by
double digits.
College football people will tell you, discussions like this are good. Yeah. No, they're not. They're bullshit, okay? Because all they are is a bunch of stupid opinions, and I'm including myself in that can't be proven out in any way. You have to have a criteria, and the criteria is really simple. If it's a 4-team playoff, you take the 4 conference champions that are rated the highest on the computer ratings. There should be no such thing as a selection committee. That's not how. What sport chooses who gets in? It's been stupid since the beginning of time, and it's still stupid. Okay, this is like the National Football League at the end of the season. So, all right, well, congratulations to everybody on 16 games, and now we're going to choose who meets each other in the playoffs. That's not how it's done. You either qualify or you don't.
I'll give you one criteria.
I think you should have 8. If you want to have a selection committee, then you have to go to 8.
I'll give you one criteria. You can't get beat by a combined 50 points.
And
one of those teams is the Iowa Hawkeyes. No, I'm not talking about if you get your changes. I'm talking about this year. You can't get beat by a combined 50 points, including 31, by a team that barely broke 500, and that's going to go to I hope they still have a Peach Bowl so we can go somewhere game. You can't do that and be included when I think all teams.
They're not going to get in
all
anyway.
teams losses that have made the playoffs, I think the average loss is by like 4 points a game.
Ohio State isn't getting in.
Well, they need help, but they could.
They have to win their game, and they have to hope that somebody else loses.
Obviously.
Because Alabama's getting in before them. One thing that will work against Ohio State, as far as the selection committee goes, if they win on Saturday, is the fact they got their nuts chewed off last year, 31-0.
Yeah.
Okay, and they will remember that. But I hate this process because playoff spots are not supposed to be decided by opinion. When are they going to get that through their head?
In Alabama sitting, they are the Ohio State of last year. They're sitting there with the 1 loss, didn't play in the championship game because they lost. Right. They lost the 1 game and didn't make it there. So, again, precedent means nothing. If you did it one way one year, you got to do it.
If
That's
Georgia-
got to be the way it has to go.
If Georgia beats Auburn, then Alabama shouldn't get in under any circumstances because, I'm sorry, I know they've only got one loss, and Auburn would have more losses, but you can't go in ahead of a team that beat you.
Yeah.
You just can't do it. Of course, it happened. But of course, we saw, unless you're Penn State, in which case.
But to go back to your argument about not moving power ratings too much, Alabama would still be favored by over everybody in college football.
Yeah. Yes,
they're
would,
the only team in college football to be top 5 in both offensive and defensive efficiency.
They're the
only
best,
team.
They're the best team in the country.
Right.
But this is the way sports work.
But I mean, you can't say I'm not going to move my power ratings too much, and then later say I'm moving my power ratings.
I will not budge off my argument. And the New England Patriots are the best team in the National Football League. If they lose in the first round of the playoffs, they don't get to play in the Super Bowl.
Sure.
Okay?
We agree on all of that stuff. We agree on not a lot, but you can't say I'm not moving my power ratings for this team, but I'm going to move them for this team. We can't do that at the same time.
Alabama's the best team in the country.
Right.
And poor Penn State out last year, and this year they have 2 losses by a total of 4 points.
Yeah, well,
one
of
on the
one
road.
of them is on the coach.
Yeah, exactly. James Franklin against Ohio State.
Yeah,
Nice
so
job.
they lose to Ohio State on the road
And that
by
probably cost them the next game, too.
Yeah, with the carryover because they had to play back-to-back weeks on the road, and they had a 4.5-hour storm delay. That game was stopped because of the lightning, and Michigan State wins at the gun on a long field goal.
Either of you guys got anything on this game, by the way?
I'm rooting for Wisconsin.
I'll give you real quickly.
I have Wisconsin.
It's not going to make my board. I'm going to have a short board this week in college football. There's one game I like a lot, but it's not one of these games. But you can get that game at WagerTalk. It's my early play. That's also my game of the week. Early plays are 11-3 for the season. Those are the games I put up on Sunday night. Games of the week. I don't know. My 5% run is like 9-1 right now, something like that. 8-1, 9-1. I forget what, but it's been really good. As far as this game goes, I know the quarterback's playing, but I wonder how healthy he is, and they're going to go after him. And this Ohio State team hasn't convinced me that they're a touchdown better than Wisconsin. Quite frankly, Wisconsin is playing with a giant chip on its shoulder because even though they're in the top 4 right now, they're still getting disrespected.
Right.
And I like talented teams that are disrespected. They're a smart, well-coached football team. I think Wisconsin can give Ohio State a game.
And Ohio State has not seen a defense anything close to what Wisconsin has.
I
know Wisconsin's not a fancy team offensively.
Right.
That's, they're boring.
And Hornibrook can throw as many, too many picks sometimes.
Yeah. But this defense is going to keep them in the ball game. I like them, and I definitely like. You got a defensive dog with a huge chip on their shoulder, something to prove. I'm there.
I played the total in this one. It's up at WagerTalk. I've hit 62% the last 2 years.
Nothing wrong with that, huh?
No, I'll take it. But it's up at WagerTalk right now, too. Marco's going to have plays up this weekend, and he's just been on an 8-0 college basketball run.
Yeah, the basketball. Yeah, the undefeated season's over, guys.
Oh, no, what happened?
Yeah, I lost.
I told you to quit.
Yeah,
you went 8-0.
8-0 to start the season.
I'm not going to say who it was. I won't do that. But I know of somebody years ago who was, and this is why I don't like these monitoring services. They had like 6 or 7 different entries with one of these sports monitors and got off to a really hot start with one of them.
And quit.
And build himself as number 1 percentage the next season in all the ads. And in fact, he was, but he didn't play anything after like 3 weeks.
Yeah, he was like 7-0.
Well, okay, so, that's
I have a feeling I know who you're talking about. But
I know you know who.
And
I'm
what?
about.
Marco was about ready. First score I see yesterday, because he told me who he liked. We got done shooting videos, and I'm getting ready to jump in my car out at the TV studio. And I that close to picking up the phone and playing it. And I thought, I got to look at the games a little bit more before I play it, even though he's been red hot, and I trust his homework, obviously. First score I see is 11-0 Penn State. What was it, a short spread, too, right?
Yeah, they were only
1 or 2 or
1.5.
something. And I'm going, God darn it. I'm like, why did I pass? Who cares if you got to look at your own stuff first? The guy's red hot. So you looked well on your way to 9-0 there. I didn't see much in the second half, by the way.
Didn't do very well in the
No,
Big
they
Ten
did
ACC
not in
challenge.
the shootout.
Hey, it's scary when the Huskers are 1 of 2 teams in the Big Ten to win in basketball against the ACC. Not that they would have beaten anybody good, but they beat Boston College, and they're okay. All right, Big 12 action, guys, in Arlington, TCU, Oklahoma. Sooners have been as low as 6. They're now 7. OU was 6 at home 3 weeks ago. Of course, this is a neutral site, I guess, playing at the house that Jerry built. 7 on the neutral site. Sooners were dominant in that first meeting, Dave.
Right.
Mayfield, 3 touchdowns, no picks. The team, 5 yards per pop in that game. There's a lot for TCU to overcome in this one.
I want to take TCU because, I know every Joe Public guy in the country is going to bet Oklahoma. The problem is I power rate the game about 10.
Right.
Okay. And I just don't know how this Oklahoma team's playing great football down the stretch. This isn't Stoops ball anymore. If Stoops was still there, it's a big game. They'll find a way to blow it. Big game blob on the sidelines.
Big game blob.
But I don't know. This Oklahoma team's real scary right now. I don't like the situation for Oklahoma because TCU is a really capable underdog, and there's stats that indicate that and it's just, I'm not going to take forever to get into this stuff, but when you're getting a touchdown or better with a defensive dog that has the qualifications TCU does, it's not a real good bet to go against them. So I'm going to stay out of the game because of that. But Oklahoma scares the living snot out of me right now. I mean, they're playing really good football.
He'll have that bad game. If he cleans it up a little bit, they got a chance to hang around. He was bad last game against Oklahoma.
An excellent
yeah, he's
coach.
Got the edge, obviously, over Riley still. Riley looks like he's going to be good, but Patterson still gets the edge.
That's right where I was going to go, is the coaching thing. Riley's done nothing wrong so far this year, and, kudos to him. And, but he has never been in a game this big, and all of the pressures on him. They're sitting there. They already beat this team. And like we said when we talked about the Auburn-Georgia game, what do you do when you're game planning for the second meeting here? Everything you did went right. Baker Mayfield, Heisman Trophy candidate, odds-on favorite to win it, I should say. But defensive dog, I got to go with it. Take Patterson here. It's hard to do because the problem with TCU is if they fall behind by 14 points, they don't have that type of offense that can come back.
Sure.
Like one thing you like to do when you're taking a touchdown is have that backdoor capabilities. This is not the type of team that's going to come in the back door.
Hill's not going to throw the ball over the field.
Yeah, they got to be there from the start. They got to make it their type of game, an ugly game, get it in the trenches, slow Oklahoma down, keep Baker Mayfield off the field for long drives, try to drive the football down the field, frustrate. When you have a high-octane offense, the best defense is keeping that offense on the sidelines. And then what ends up happening is that team gets a little bit frustrated.
Yep.
Yeah, they come in and try to force the issue a little bit. And when you're a good defensive team, that's when you can get those turnovers. I think TCU has a big shot in this game.
To use a basketball term, it's if they get their tempo and they force their tempo, they've got a great shot at maybe winning the game outright, not just hanging that point spread. That's Marco D'Angelo, Dave Cokin in studio. I'm Scott. Mark Seidel at the controls. When we come back, we're going to throw some best bets at you from this weekend's college football. Stick around.
Every Tuesday, WagerTalk.com offers a best bet selection from its hottest handicapper. It's a great way to introduce yourself to WagerTalk.com with a big best bet winner for just $2 on $2 Tuesday.
Welcome back to WagerTalk College Football Podcast. Don't forget to check out the NFL podcast when you're done with this one, also at WagerTalk.com. Best bet time. You can check this guy out at WagerTalk.com and on Twitter at Dave Cokin. He's been red hot basketball, doing well in football. Nice Thanksgiving week, Dave. And you got a best bet for us now.
Yeah, I used Fresno State last week and got a win with them against BYU, getting 7 at home, which was really nice. Now they're getting actually a little more than that on the road. And how are they on the road here?
Yeah.
Now, this game was already set going into last week's game, which I thought was an advantage for Fresno State because I thought they might want the game a little bit more playing at home. And, Boise can sit back and relax a little bit. But the thing of it was, I also thought that the location of the game was still to be determined. Well, it's fair. I'm not going to say that Fresno got screwed because they actually had a criteria for this in the Mountain West. And the criteria was who's ever got the better playoff ranking at the end of the regular season gets the home game. Okay, fair enough. That was set. It wasn't based on opinion or anything like that. Now, personally, I would use the head-to-head matchup as the tiebreaker, but be that as it may, this is what they came up with before the season started, and I'm fine with that. However, what it does is it does create a big chip on the shoulder that Jeff Tedford can use to really fire up his team. Well, we beat him last week. We beat him at every aspect of the game. We were clearly the better team. We should have been given the home game here, and instead they're making us go to Boise. Let's show them that they were wrong. And by the way, I think Tedford can outcoach Harsin again. He did last week. Made some good in-game adjustments, I thought, and particularly after halftime. And Fresno was really impressive in that game. I think you got a tight game here. I think this is a one-possession game. So to me, in a one-possession game, taking the points looks like a good idea, and I would side with Fresno here.
Good stuff, Fresno State. I think they're going to have the chip on the shoulder when they go into Boise. Marco, you have been on that nice basketball run we talked about, and then we went off for 15 minutes on hardwood action. Your best bet for this week is?
I'm going to go to Central Florida, and what a job Scott Frost has done there.
Boy.
And, this team, in a matter of, a short period of time went from, not winning at all, to possibly the complete reversal and have the undefeated season. I like what happened last week, and that's why I have this play. And we actually were talking about whenever a good team has that scare, I like it to be the wake-up call. And for me, last week's game was the fact I'm looking at it like they already played a playoff game.
Sure.
Playing South Florida last week with everything that was on the line and to fall behind and then to come back and win that game.
Did you watch the game, by the way? The kickoff return right after the touchdown was scored. Then you get a kickoff return for a touchdown in the second. It was a great game.
I was out running around on Friday, so I didn't see the game, but I was following the scores on my phone, and it was like, are they going to, what come to mind to me right away is all the Scott Frost rumors. Is this creeping into the team and so forth, distraction and everything else. But they found a way to win it. Now I think here they just got too much. They play defense. That's something that Memphis does not do. Memphis can score on anybody, but they don't play defense. And the one team that's shut this team down, and it's their only loss of the season, was against Central Florida. Now you're saying to yourself, yeah, but weren't you guys all talking about the adjustments and all these other games that we previewed? This one was early in the season, and yes, Memphis was not the same team. They're not as good as they are now, but Central Florida, I think, is better as well also. And they had the scare last week. I like this one. I think this team, they know they're going to lose Scott Frost. I think they're playing as a family. Want to go out. We saw this situation a few years ago, ironically, with the other team on the other side, Memphis, when Justin Fuentes was being, suited, and he's going here, he's going there, and all the rumors are there. And he was a coach that the team loved. They played hard for him. I think you're going to see it here for Central Florida. I'm going to go ahead and lay the points with them on Saturday. I'll take the defense in a game that both teams can score. And I like the quarterback, that dual threat with him being able to run the football as well as throw the football. Just too much for Memphis to try to stop.
I was doing a show on Wednesday night and on Mad Dog Radio. Patrick Maher is the host. You know Matt. Yep. Patrick, you've done a couple of shows with him. And he brought up a good point because we've talked about it on the Las Vegas Sports Line when Scott Frost comes to Nebraska because they lost Texas recruiting when they pulled out of the Big 12. That was their pipeline. They got, Turner Gill. Going all the way back then, one Dallas-Fort Worth player after another, Houston player, and so on. Scott Frost has tapped into that Florida pipeline. And I heard there's some inside sources saying he might go to Nebraska, joking about that. But if he does, they might have a little bit of an advantage there again with Florida, with Scott Frost as head coach. All right, my best bet, I'm going to go with UL Monroe. Going to go away from a conference championship here. I'm going to take all those big, fat, juicy points and hope that I get the same type of UL Monroe offensive effort that I got out of them when they played Auburn a few weeks ago and covered the spread, lost 42-14, but they were getting a whole lot more points, and we covered that one easily. This is a team that averages almost 500 yards per game, talking about Monroe. They average over 5 touchdowns per game. You're getting 27 in this contest, and you got Florida State, who despite scoring a bunch of points last week, and they come off the big rivalry win over Florida, they barely topped 200 yards in that particular game, even though they scored almost 40 points. They get outgained regularly. I like UL Monroe here. I'm going to take the big spot, 27, with UL Monroe over Florida State. Florida State gets that win for Jimbo Fisher, who might be going elsewhere after the season, but I don't think they come close to the point spread. UL Monroe, my best bet. By the way, as I mentioned, you can follow Dave at Dave Cokin, Marco, of course, at WagerTalk and at Marco in Vegas. I'm at WagerTalk.com. You can follow me at Scott Wins. We appreciate you joining us. Be sure to check out the NFL podcast right now, also right here on WagerTalk.com.
And I bid you good night, good night, good night.
I'll catch you on the flip side.